They never feared your weakness. They feared the day you'd stop pretending to be weak. Well, well, well. Looks like the cat's out of the bag, my dear chosen ones. The secret's spilled, the mask is shattered, and the people who swore they had you figured out are standing there like, wait, that's who they really are? Yeah. Oops. Now everybody knows who you actually are, and that tightness in their chest. That's not confusion, that's fear. You didn't sneak into this moment. You were dragged here by every insult, every eye roll, every fake laugh at your dreams. You earned this era the hard way, through bruises they pretended not to see, through quiet nights where you doubted yourself, but still showed up, through storms they were sure would drown you. And now look, the person they bet against is the one they can't stop watching. My dear chosen ones, let that sink in for a second. You became their worst-case scenario just by finally being yourself. Why are they so weird around me now, you might be asking. Why do they act different? Because they're replaying everything in their heads. Every time they mocked you, every time they dismissed you, every time they treated you like background noise while you were silently building the version of you that just walked onto their mental stage and stole the spotlight. They're not confused, they're exposed. You walking into a room now feels like someone turned down the volume on the whole place, just so your presence could come through clearer. People who once looked over your head now glance away, fidget with their phone, pretend to be busy. The ones who laughed at your silence now trip over basic sentences. They feel that shift. Even the ones acting like nothing happened. The air around you has changed. Chosen one. It's not loud, but it's heavy. The kind of heavy that says, somebody lost here and it wasn't you. Hit that like button and subscribe if you feel this already. Don't do it just as a habit. Do it as a statement. I'm not hiding anymore. It supports this mission more than you realize. Here's a quote you need to tattoo on your mind. Every time they tried to shrink you, they were just confessing how small they felt next to your potential. They didn't call you too much because you were a problem. They called you too much because they were terrified of someone who wasn't easily controlled. They didn't say you'll never do it because they had wisdom. They said it because if you ever did it, their whole fake sense of superiority would crumble. My dear chosen ones, you were never the weak one in the story. You were the one collecting data. While they performed power, you studied their patterns. While they bragged about winning, you were quietly learning what real winning actually looks like. While they mistook your patience for helplessness, you were training your reaction time, your emotional control, your vision. You weren't late, you were loading. Remember that moment, maybe months ago, maybe years, when someone laughed at your dream like it was a joke. That wasn't advice. That was fear wearing a fake smile. They saw something in you you hadn't fully accepted yet. It scared them to imagine you actually stepping into it, so they tried to kill it early. Too big, too unrealistic. Be serious. Translation: please don't grow into the person I can't compete with. Press like and subscribe so this message keeps reaching other chosen ones who are right on the edge of this same reveal. We're not just watching a video here, we're building a movement of people who refuse to keep dimming themselves just so insecure people can breathe easy. And now, here's the part that really stings for them. Your secret is out. The real you stepped forward and there's no going back. You're not bending your spine just so someone else can feel tall. You're not twisting your personality to make fragile egos comfortable. You're not smoothing your edges to fit into spaces that were never built to hold your full size. The version of you they thought they buried. That's the version that's about to rewrite the whole script. You didn't just survive what they did to you, you outgrew it. You didn't just endure betrayal, you outclassed it. You didn't just walk away from their nonsense. You evolved into something they can't categorize, can't predict, can't manipulate. That's why they're scared, chosen one. Not because you're different now, but because they finally realized you were never what they decided you were. The mask didn't fall off by accident. You took it off because it stopped fitting. Before we move forward, my dear chosen ones, pause for just a moment and help fuel this mission. Every like, every subscription, every bit of support you give is what keeps this energy alive. It's what allows us to keep showing up with messages that hit hard, lift you higher, and remind you exactly who you are. If you want this kind of powerful, inspiring, life-shifting content to keep coming your way, tap that like button and subscribe right now. It's a small action that creates a massive ripple. Your support tells us, keep going, we need this, we're awake. Am I being too much now? Am I overreacting? Am I the problem? Those questions might still be echoing in your head. Let me answer them for you. No, you're not too much. You're finally accurate. You're not overreacting. You're just not under-responding anymore. You're not the problem. You're the mirror. And mirrors make people uncomfortable when they've been lying to themselves for too long. Your secret's out, my dear chosen one. They know what you are now, focused, resilient, sharp, and done pretending. They can't unsee your power, no matter how much they avoid your eyes. If you're still here, still listening, still feeling that pull in your chest like, yeah, this is about me, then you are exactly where you're supposed to be. If you want to push this message even louder, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments so I know you're walking into this next chapter with your head up and your mask off. Because this is the turning point. Tighten your grip, chosen one. The next part goes even harder. Chosen ones, before we crack open the next layer of this revelation, let me speak directly to you. Your support is the engine behind every word we create, every truth we drop, every fire we build. If this message is hitting exactly where you needed it to, if you feel that shift in your chest, the "yeah, that's me" moment, then show it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a bold 77 in the comments so we know you're walking into this new era unmasked and unbothered. And if you want to push this mission even further, a super thanks tells us loud and clear, keep going, keep dropping the truth, keep exposing what they fear. And now, let's dive deeper, step by step, because if you really are the chosen one they're terrified of, everything that comes next is going to feel eerily familiar. These aren't coincidences. These are the signs of someone whose secret is out and whose power can't be stuffed back into silence. Only chosen ones carry this kind of impact. Ordinary people don't get these reactions. They don't trigger this kind of panic. Let's get started. Number 1. The power they swore you'd never grow into, when the quiet one finally shows their teeth. They never feared your weakness. They feared the day you'd stop playing weak. My dear chosen ones, welcome to the moment they prayed would never come. The moment the mask slipped, the moment the room went still, the moment their illusion of who you were shattered so violently that even they flinched at the sound. This is where the story twists. This is where the harmless one turns out to be the very force they should have never provoked. This is where they realize, far too late, why your silence was the loudest warning they ever ignored. You might be asking yourself, why did they underestimate me this badly? Why were they so confident I had no teeth? Because, chosen one, you let them see the version of you that caused the least trouble. You let them meet the calm before the storm, not the storm itself. You gave them the gentle version, the soft outline, the quiet silhouette, not because you lacked power, but because unleashing it too early would have exposed every insecurity they tried to hide. And that's the punchline. They weren't analyzing you. They were projecting themselves onto you. They assumed you were small because they couldn't imagine being big. They assumed you were harmless because they couldn't imagine having restraint. They assumed your silence meant emptiness because they couldn't comprehend depth. My dear chosen ones, understand this. You didn't trick them. They tricked themselves. For years you walked around with your energy folded up neatly, like a blade tucked safely in its sheath. You let them see the agreeable one, the quiet one, the easy-to-manage one, not because that was all you were, but because revealing your edge too early could have cut the wrong people, the wrong way, at the wrong time. What they mistook for weakness was simply strategy. Then one day, maybe by choice, maybe by accident, the truth slipped. A spark in your eyes, a shift in your tone, a stillness in your posture. A moment where the real you stepped forward without asking permission. And that tiny moment, it hit their ego like a brick wall. My dear chosen ones, let me ask you something. Didn't you see the way their face changed? Didn't you feel the temperature shift? Didn't you catch that flicker of panic, even if they tried to hide it? That wasn't confusion, that was realization. They finally saw who they were really dealing with, and the mask they built around you crumbled like cheap paper, because nothing terrifies insecure people more than discovering the person they underestimated is the one person they can't control. This is the part where their excuses fall apart. This is the part where their false dominance melts. This is the part where they realize the quiet one was the most dangerous one all along. Chosen one, they never feared who you were back then. They feared who you would become once you saw yourself clearly. They feared the day you'd stop apologizing for your strength. They feared the day your patience ran out and your truth walked in. And now that the moment has arrived, they're scrambling mentally, emotionally, socially. Suddenly, they're cautious. Suddenly, they're polite. Suddenly, they're pretending they always supported you, even though their past actions are still taped on the walls of your memory. You might wonder, why do they look guilty around me now? Because guilt is the shadow cast by exposure. Because once someone realizes they misjudged the wrong person, their entire spine stiffens with regret. Because every joke they made, every rumor they whispered, every brag they tossed in your direction now feels like a confession of their own insecurity. They didn't laugh because you were small. They laughed because they hoped you'd stay small. Your growth humiliated them because it proved how wrong they were. About you, about themselves, about everything they thought they had power over. And now here they are, performing humility, performing kindness, performing respect. Not out of sincerity, but out of fear. Let me paint you a picture, chosen one. Imagine someone poking a sleeping wolf, thinking it's a harmless dog. Then the wolf opens its eyes, slowly, quietly, intentionally. Do you think that person would ever sleep comfortably again? That's the shift you created. Because once they saw the steel beneath your softness, they couldn't unsee it. Once they saw the discipline behind your silence, they couldn't forget it. Once they realized you weren't harmless, you were simply choosing not to bite, they understood just how foolish they'd been. Now, listen closely, chosen one. Their disbelief was never evidence of your limits. It was evidence of theirs. A mind that's small could never measure someone built this big. You didn't become powerful. You simply stopped pretending not to be. And that is the truth they can't handle. That is the truth burning their pride like acid. That is the truth turning their fake confidence into dust. My dear chosen ones, you are not stepping into a new version of yourself. You are returning to the version you were always meant to be, the version they hoped would stay buried, the version they feared would rise, the version that doesn't shrink, doesn't bow, and doesn't soften just to make fragile people feel taller. And now that your truth is out, the story only gets harder, sharper, and even more revealing. The next chapter awaits. Number 2. The moment their illusions collapsed under your truth. The moment their fantasy crashed into your reality. The real shock isn't that they finally saw your truth, chosen one. The real shock is that now they can't scrub it out of their minds, no matter how hard they try. Once the truth bares its teeth, the lie can never feel safe again. And that's exactly what they're wrestling with. The truth of who you've always been, standing face to face with the lie they built to feel superior. Some faces haunt people not because they are frightening, but because they expose the coward inside the ones who pretended to be brave. And your face, your real face, is now the reflection they can't outrun. They wanted you small, tucked into a cheap little frame where you posed no threat, made no noise, and demanded nothing. They needed you edited, cropped, diluted, but chosen one. The day you stopped squeezing yourself into their narrow expectations was the same day they realized their grip on the story was gone. You were the storm warning they ignored, laughing at the clouds because they convinced themselves it wouldn't rain. Now they're standing in the aftermath, soaking wet, stunned, embarrassed, and scrambling for shelter they should have built years ago. Welcome back to the battlefield they swore you'd never step foot on, my dear chosen one. This is where the fear becomes visible, the shift in their shoulders, the hesitation in their voice, the way their eyes flicker when you walk by. This time, it's not your mask slipping, it's theirs. They see you differently now, not because you changed, but because their fiction dissolved in the presence of reality. They're trying to act normal, speak casually, move comfortably, pretending they're fine. But underneath every smile is a tremor. Under every sentence is a swallow. Under every laugh is panic. They're choking on the truth now, and there's no water that can wash it down. You stopped shrinking, chosen one, and that alone rewired their entire perception. They can't unsee your real size. They can't return to the fantasy version of you they glued together from their own insecurities. Their eyes stay open like someone who saw a ghost that looks exactly like the person they tried to break. Imagine someone casually walking past what they believed was a harmless puppy, only to realize it was a full-grown wolf that simply chose not to bite. That's what your reveal did to them. They saw the teeth. They saw the intelligence. They saw the power they misread as softness. And once a wolf reveals itself, nobody ever sees a puppy again. Once upon a time, they talked freely around you, bragged, postured, mocked, dismissed. Now, every word is weighed like they're handling explosives. They replay what they say. They study how you respond. They analyze your silence. They tiptoe around your boundaries. And don't confuse this shift for respect. It's not respect. It's correction. Their worldview glitched the moment you stopped dimming yourself for their comfort. You didn't become louder or different or intimidating. You simply stopped pretending that their comfort mattered more than your truth. And chosen one, if you're wondering, why are they acting so strange now? Here's your answer. They finally met the real you. Not the quiet version, not the agreeable version, not the version playing small to keep the peace. They met the version of you that doesn't perform power because it is power, the version that chooses peace, not submission. But peace ends the moment disrespect begins. They picked up what they thought was a stone, tossed it aside, and only then realized it was a diamond. The regret hit them so hard their pride cracked. They handled you like something replaceable. Now they're sick with the truth that you were the rarest thing they ever touched. Imagine someone bragging about swimming confidently in shallow water, only for the tide to pull back and reveal the ocean's true depth. That's you. You let them stand on your shore and thought they were safe. They thought they understood you. But the moment you stepped into your true form, the depth revealed itself, and they're still drowning in the realization of how wrong they were. They're not just shocked, they're unsettled. You broke their mental map. The version of you they created was predictable, manageable, unthreatening. But the real you? Sharp, focused, unbending. A person who doesn't beg for validation or bow for acceptance. A person who knows exactly who they are. And now they're scrambling because they can't put the genie back in the bottle. They can't unhear your truth. They can't unfeel the shift. They can't unsee the look in your eyes that said, "I'm done playing small so you can feel big." You might also be wondering, if they underestimated me, why do they look guilty now? Because guilt loves to wear disguises, confusion, awkwardness, distance, politeness. But underneath it all is fear. They saw a flash of the power you were holding back, and everything inside them panicked. They're not walking on eggshells. They're walking on landmines they planted themselves. Every joke they made feels like a confession. Every doubt they threw feels like a crime scene. Every dismissal feels like a public embarrassment they can't outrun. And now they're strategizing. How should we treat them now? What if they remember everything? What if they finally speak up? What if the truth comes back around? Look at the irony. When you were quiet, they were bold. When you revealed your strength, they folded. Picture a magician who spends years performing harmless tricks for an audience who politely claps, until one day the magician decides to stop holding back. The impossible happens. The audience can't tell whether to cheer or run. That's the effect you have now. Your silence became threatening. Your confidence became intimidating. Your glow became undeniable. Your boundaries became non-negotiable. They can't unsee the fire in your eyes. They can't unsee the certainty in your posture. They can't unsee the calm that comes from knowing exactly who you are. They can't unsee the truth that you were never theirs to underestimate. And here's the final truth bomb. Chosen one. Once someone sees your real power, they only get two choices. Step up or step out. And you already know which option most of them chose. Get ready. The next section goes even darker, sharper, and more surgical. Number 3. The day their fantasy version of you finally died, when their make-believe version of you crashed into the real thing. There comes a moment, my dear chosen ones, where the truth doesn't tiptoe in politely. It kicks the damn door open and shows everyone exactly what they were so desperate to misinterpret. This was that moment. The moment their fiction, crafted from their insecurities, their guesses, their wishful thinking, collided headfirst with your reality. And let's be clear, they were not prepared. They weren't even in the same neighborhood as prepared, because the real you wasn't the character they wrote in their heads. You weren't the weak one, the confused one, the harmless placeholder they convinced themselves you were. No, you were the truth they didn't want to believe existed. Chosen one, when you stepped into your full presence, unfiltered, unshrinking, unapologetic, it felt like a glitch in their system, a crack in their storyline. For years, they built entire narratives around who they thought you were. Soft, clueless, predictable. They studied a version of you that never actually walked this earth. They analyzed shadows, not substance. They prepared for a cardboard cutout while the real you was sharpening edges behind the scenes. And it only took one moment, one slip of your real strength, one flash of your real identity, for every lie they told themselves to collapse like rotten wood. You may be wondering, why did it shake them so deeply? Why did they panic the moment they saw the truth? Because people who build their confidence on fantasy are terrified of reality. They rely on illusions to stay afloat. And you, chosen one, you were the reality check they never planned for. They expected cruelty or chaos, something they could label, something they could dismiss as you acting out. But what they saw instead was far more threatening. Someone who simply refused to bend. Someone who didn't apologize just to keep the peace. Someone who didn't shrink to fit their comfort zone. Authenticity is the loudest threat to people who only know how to survive through performance. Picture this. A group of actors on stage, bragging about how well they're playing their roles, laughing, posing, exaggerating their importance, until they notice the real protagonist sitting quietly in the audience, watching every move, every flaw, every misstep. That's you, chosen one. They treated life like a script, like they were the main characters. They assumed you were part of their storyline, orbiting around their ego. But you weren't following their script. You were analyzing it. They thought you were lost. You were observing. They thought you were confused. You were calculating. They thought you were behind. You were simply waiting for the right moment to step on stage, not as a character, but as the plot twist. And when that moment happened, when your presence finally overshadowed their performance, the panic in their eyes wasn't subtle. It was instant. Their rehearsed confidence fell apart. Their forced bravery melted. Their fragile smiles cracked, revealing everything underneath. The insecurity, the fear, the realization that they were never the ones in control. You had seen everything the whole time. The exaggerated pride, the trembling egos, the loud voices supported by shaky foundations, and you kept quiet, not because you didn't notice, but because intelligent people don't expose fools. They let the truth reveal itself at the right time. Let's take another metaphor. Chosen ones. Imagine someone flexing in a cracked mirror, hyping themselves up, admiring a distorted reflection, truly believing they are larger than life, until the mirror finally shatters and they're forced to face their real size. You were that shatter. You were the moment their delusion split open and revealed the truth they'd been running from. And the truth was simple. You were never as small as they pretended you were. You were never as clueless as they hoped you were. You were never as harmless as they convinced themselves you were. This revelation didn't break you, it broke them. You weren't having a meltdown, they were having an awakening. Everything they thought they understood dissolved. Every assumption collapsed. Every power move they attempted became a joke in hindsight. And the part that terrifies them the most is this: you weren't blind, you were patient. And patience, chosen ones, is the deadliest weapon a powerful person can carry, because patience means control, patience means awareness, patience means you had the discipline to wait until the exact moment where revealing yourself would hit the hardest. Now the roles have reversed. Now the truth is out. Now they see the real you, the one they never bothered to prepare for, the one they never imagined they'd have to face. And this is only the beginning. Their panic is fresh, their confusion is raw, their fear is real. Because once fiction crashes into reality, there is no going back. And chosen one, you are that reality. Number 4. The silence that turned into their greatest threat. The quiet that became their worst-case scenario. They always misunderstood your silence, chosen one. They studied your calm and labeled it emptiness. They watched your stillness and mistook it for stagnation. They saw you observing instead of reacting, and their minds, so used to noise and theatrics, translated your restraint as weakness. What a delicious irony, isn't it? The very thing they mocked is the very thing that's haunting them now. Because your silence was never the absence of power, it was the presence of preparation. It was you sharpening edges they didn't even know existed. Silence doesn't mean I had nothing to say. It means I was watching who deserved my voice. My dear chosen ones, let's make one thing clear. They never feared your noise. They feared the day your silence would end. While they puffed their chests, raised their voices, and performed confidence like it was a cheap stage act, you were evolving in places their eyes could never reach. They were loud for attention. You were quiet for elevation. They were busy attracting fans. You were busy building foundations. And now that their illusions have collapsed, they're realizing that your silence was the signal they should have paid more attention to. You see, chosen ones don't grow where people can applaud them. They grow in shadows, in solitude, in spaces so quiet that even their heartbeat starts sounding like a warning bell. Your silence was your incubation period, your loading screen, your recalibration, your sharpening process. It wasn't passive, it was powerful. While they thought nothing was happening, everything was happening. And now the reveal is hitting them harder than any retaliation ever could. Imagine this. They were playing checkers on a flimsy plastic table, celebrating every tiny jump like it made them grandmasters. And there you were, seated quietly, studying the entire chessboard they weren't even aware existed. Every move they made felt bold to them. Every joke, every flex, every attempt to outmaneuver you, they thought they were being clever. But to you, chosen one, every one of their patterns was predictable, repetitive, and painfully basic. They weren't winning. They were performing victories in a game you mastered before they even learned the rules. And then came the moment, the trigger, the shift, the crack in the mask you were politely wearing. Maybe someone pushed you too far. Maybe someone crossed a boundary they didn't think you had. Maybe someone forgot who they were dealing with. Whatever the reason, the truth stepped out from behind your quiet demeanor, and it hit them like a sudden drop in temperature. You didn't yell, you didn't explode, you didn't beg to be understood. You simply revealed what you had been holding back. And that reveal was lethal, not because it was loud, but because it was undeniable. You weren't soft, you were selective. You weren't weak, you were controlled. You weren't simple, you were strategic. That's what terrifies them now, not just what you said or did, but what your silence means in hindsight. They're replaying every conversation, every smug comment, every backhanded joke, and the embarrassment is chewing them alive, because they're realizing none of it touched you. You weren't reacting because you weren't threatened. You were observing. You weren't silent because you were intimidated. You were silent because you were calculating. You weren't being outsmarted. You were being entertained. Now that they've seen even a glimpse of the real you, they can't unsee it. That's the part that's eating at them. The quiet one, yes, the one they dismissed, ignored, underestimated, was actually 3 steps ahead the entire time. And now that the truth is out, now that the secret is exposed, they're left with the uncomfortable realization that every time they thought they put you in your place, the only person who fell for that illusion was them. Chosen one, your quiet was never their advantage. It was their setup. You let them reveal their intentions, their insecurities, their limits, all while you stayed steady, patient, and unshaken. They thought you were slow. No, you were precise. They thought you were passive. No, you were poised. They thought you were easy to read. No, you were choosing not to be readable. And now that your silence has transformed into visibility, now that they see who you are without the dimmer switch, they're spiraling. Because nothing haunts insecure people more than realizing the person they thought was beneath them was the one they should have never provoked. Your quiet was never peaceful for them. It was the calm before the version of you that terrifies them now. And this is only the beginning. Number 5. The strength. They never imagined you were controlling. The panic that hits when they realize they haven't even seen your final form. They feared the little piece of you that slipped through the cracks, chosen one. They panicked over the tiny fraction you never meant to reveal. Now imagine the horror crawling up their spine when they understand that what they saw wasn't the full picture. It was just the trailer, a preview, a teaser, a silent announcement that the real you hasn't even stepped onto the stage yet. And that's where their nerves start glitching, where their confidence starts cracking, where their entire sense of superiority begins to dissolve beneath their feet. Because they aren't scared of what you showed them. They're scared of what you didn't. My dear chosen one, this is the moment they sit with the terrifying realization that they misread you so catastrophically, so embarrassingly, that they don't even trust their own judgment anymore. If they were that wrong about you, the person they once wrote off as predictable, harmless, small, then what else have they been blind to? If the glimpse they caught of your power shook their ego like an earthquake, what would happen if you stopped holding back completely? What would happen if you stopped dimming your light just to keep the peace? What would happen if you operated at full capacity, no apologizing, no minimizing, no shrinking? That question alone keeps them awake at night. Imagine this. Someone thinks they've climbed a high hill, proud of themselves, bragging, chest out, ego inflated. But then they look up, really look up, and suddenly they realize the hill was just the first step. Behind it, towering over the horizon, is a mountain so massive it blocks out the sun. That's how they see you now. Not as someone who changed overnight, but someone whose true scale was always beyond their imagination. Someone whose power was never gone, just hidden, folded, waiting. Because chosen one, you were never small. You were never limited. You were never what they labeled you as. Your true strength was simply invisible to people who lacked the depth to perceive anything beyond surface level. Now they're choking on a single brutal question. If that tiny piece of their power was enough to shake everything, how powerful are they really? They replay everything now. Every moment they thought they won. Every time they assumed you were beneath them. Every smug little comment they made thinking they were ahead. Every illusion of control they bragged about. And now each memory feels embarrassing, delusional, foolish. Because the truth hits them like a cold slap. You weren't losing. You weren't struggling. You weren't being outplayed. You were holding back. Not because you were afraid. Not because you lacked skill. But because unleashing everything you had would have blown their entire sense of reality apart. You were controlling your power the way someone controls their breathing, steady, intentional, measured. You weren't the weak one, you were the disciplined one. Imagine them discovering the monster under the bed wasn't a monster at all. It was you, sitting calmly in the dark, unbothered, meditating, choosing peace over proving points. That's the level of depth they never saw coming. They thought your silence meant emptiness. They thought your patience meant naivety. They thought your restraint meant inability. But now they know every moment you stayed quiet was a choice, not a limitation. Here's the truth they're faced with now, a truth that hits harder than any punch you could have thrown. You've been operating at 30%, a fraction, a sliver, a small slice of what you're capable of, and even that tiny percentage was enough to shake their world, expose their ego, and unravel the stories they built about you. If 30% of you could make them uncomfortable, what would 50% look like? What about 70%? What about the full, unleashed, unapologetic you? They know the answer, chosen one. That's why they're terrified. That's why they're acting different. That's why they're watching you with that strange mix of confusion, fear, and awe. Because if the version of you they witnessed was just a preview, then the full version of you, the version with nothing held back, nothing softened, nothing dimmed, isn't someone they could compete with, control, or even stand beside without feeling exposed. They know they wouldn't survive the impact of your full presence. They know they wouldn't recover from the truth of your strength, and deep down they know this too. The real you hasn't even arrived yet. And when you do, oh, chosen one, they'll understand why they should have never poked the quiet person in the first place. Number 6. The real you that outshined their loudest performances. The moment they realized you were the main event. Chosen one. This is the point in the story where their entire reality caves in. The point where they finally understood something you've known deep down your whole life. You were never the side note, never the background character, never the warm-up act. You were the main event the entire time, and they were too invested in their own comfort to see it. But now the secret's out, and their panic has turned into something far sharper: despair. Not because you changed, but because they finally realized how little of your true self you ever showed them. Even when you were operating at a fraction of your power, you still burned hotter than their most exaggerated performances. They tried their hardest: big voices, loud gestures, dramatic confidence, but none of it could compete with your natural presence. That wasn't your ego speaking. That wasn't you trying to shine. That was just you existing at 30%, giving the world the bare minimum of your spark, simply because you didn't want to disrupt the fragile balance they clung to. You weren't flexing. You weren't competing. You weren't even aiming to be seen. You were just being you, and even that level of you made them uncomfortable. Imagine their horror, chosen one, when they realized that the version of you they'd been comparing themselves to wasn't your peak, it was your preview. They saw that tiny spark, that subtle shift in your posture, that tone in your voice that said, "I've outgrown pretending to be less than I am." And that one moment sent them into a mental free fall. It rewired everything they thought they understood about you. Because if the calm version of you was that powerful, what would happen if you ever stopped holding yourself back? Let's answer that question the way they're too afraid to. Your full power doesn't compete. It takes over. They thought your quiet was your final form. They misread your patience as your personality. They confused your restraint for limitation. They assumed your softness was all you had. But it was never softness. It was control. It was precision. It was you deciding peace mattered more than proving a point. They didn't realize your boundaries weren't built from fear. They were built from discipline. And when that discipline loosened just enough for your real energy to slip through, they weren't just surprised. They were shaken. Picture this. Someone believes they've just watched the entire movie. They clap, satisfied with themselves, thinking they've seen everything there is to see. Then the lights flicker, the screen widens, and a voice says, "That wasn't the movie. That was the trailer." You can almost hear their heartbeat drop into their stomach. That's exactly what happened when they saw the real you. Everything they thought they understood suddenly felt painfully incomplete. My dear chosen ones, their greatest fear isn't what you've already shown. It's what you haven't yet revealed. They keep replaying it in their heads. If that was only a glimpse. If that was only you being nice. If that was only you being patient. Then who is the full version? That question haunts them because they know, deeply, painfully, that once you decide to stop shrinking, there is no returning to the world where they felt superior. You stepping into your truth means stepping out of their shadow, and without your dimmed light propping them up, they have nothing left to hide behind. Your glow exposes every insecurity they've been burying. Your authenticity unmasks their performance. Your presence alone disrupts their illusion of control. That's why they're terrified now, not confused, not surprised. Terrified because your transformation wasn't you becoming someone new. It was you removing the filter they depended on. They're not scared of the spark you revealed. They're scared of the wildfire still resting in your bones. They're scared of the version of you that no longer apologizes. They're scared of the version that no longer adjusts your brightness to accommodate people who would never dim their own for you. They're scared because they know the truth now. You were never meant to fit into their comfort zone. You were meant to expand beyond it. Your full power isn't a threat, chosen one. It's a shift. It's a takeover. It's a complete rearrangement of the hierarchy they once thought was unchangeable. And the wildest part, you still haven't even stepped into your peak. This isn't you unleashed. This isn't you maxed out. This isn't even you warmed up. This is you simply deciding to stop hiding. And that alone was enough to shake their world. When you're ready, chosen one, I'll write the next one. Number 7. The shift that exposed their nerves like raw wire. When the tables turned and their nerves finally showed. Funny, isn't it, chosen one? The same mouths that once spoke your name with mockery now struggle to get the syllables out without their voice cracking. That's what happens when the truth shows up unannounced. You've seen the shift. Oh, you've felt it. Their whole vibe flipped like an old system glitching under pressure, unable to process the update that you were never the person they convinced themselves you were. One day they were bold, loud, dripping with fake authority. The next day they were blinking too much, swallowing too hard, choosing their words like every sentence was a landmine. Because it is. You changed the equation, chosen one, and they were never prepared to solve you. Look closely at their eyes now. That lazy confidence they used to wear like cheap cologne? Gone, replaced with something sticky, uneasy, unsure. They stare a moment too long, not out of admiration but out of confusion. They're studying you, analyzing you, trying to fit you back into the small box they used to keep you in. But the box is gone. You burned it the moment you stepped into who you actually are. And now they're stuck looking at someone they can't categorize, can't predict, and absolutely can't handle. You became unfamiliar to them, not because you changed overnight, but because they finally saw what was always there. Chosen one, nothing terrifies insecure people more than someone they can't control. Someone who doesn't beg for approval. Someone who no longer plays along with their imaginary hierarchy. You used to be safe for their ego, and that wasn't a compliment. That was a role you outgrew. When you were quiet, they felt tall. When you were patient, they felt powerful. When you held your tongue, they mistook it as a sign they were untouchable. But the moment that silence shifted, when your posture changed, when your eyes sharpened, when your energy hit the room before you even opened your mouth, they panicked. Now listen, chosen one. Their sudden politeness isn't respect, it's self-preservation. Their awkward smiles aren't warmth. Their camouflage, their soft voices, careful words, and forced friendliness aren't compliments. They're confessions. Confessions that say, we misjudged the wrong person. You became the unpredictable variable in an equation they thought they mastered. And humans, especially those built on insecurity, always panic when the equation stops behaving the way they expect. Watch the backtracking. They're rewriting history in real time. People who once treated you like a background character now greet you like they've always known your worth. The ones who laughed the loudest now laugh quietly, cautiously, unsure if humor is even allowed in your presence. The ones who dismissed you suddenly remember your name, your face, your achievements, as if their memory got a software update. They're not reconnecting, they're retreating. They're not checking in because they care. They're checking in because they feel the shift like a tremor under their feet. Imagine this image, chosen one. Predators walking across a field, chests puffed, jaws open, confident in their assumed dominance. Then suddenly they look up and realize the creature they thought was prey stands taller, sharper, and vastly more aware than any of them combined. That moment, that stomach-drop realization, that's what they felt when you stopped shrinking. Their instincts scream, run. Their pride whispers, stay. And that tug of war in their chest is eating them alive. You might wonder, why the sudden friendliness? Why the careful tone? Why the sudden distance? Why the shift? The answer is simple: damage control. They're not afraid of what you'll do to them. They're afraid of what they've already done to you. They're terrified of the consequences of underestimating someone who turned out to be everything they feared and more. Behind their polite smiles is panic. Behind their greetings is guilt. Behind their soft tone is the realization that they can't undo the disrespect they once casually threw your way. You changed the power dynamic, chosen one. You flipped the script without announcing it, without permission, without warning. And the wildest part? You didn't even do it maliciously. You didn't plot. You didn't fight. You simply became yourself, and that alone was enough to expose their true nerves. They can't unfeel the shift. They can't unsee who you are now. They can't undo the truth that slipped into the room and sat between you like undeniable proof. You didn't intimidate them with threats. You intimidated them with authenticity, with growth, with clarity, with presence. Chosen one, understand this. They're not scared of you. They're scared of everything your presence reveals about them. And once that truth hits, there's no hiding place left to run to. Number 8. The threshold. They wish you never stepped across. The door they wish you never walked through. The moment you stepped through that invisible door, chosen one, everything changed, and not just for you, for them. The same people who once felt so comfortable shaping you into a smaller, quieter, more manageable version of yourself suddenly realized they had lost control of the narrative. And once that truth hit, it hit like a punch they never saw coming. They thought they knew your limits. They thought they understood your range. They thought they could predict your moves because they mistook your silence for emptiness and your patience for submission. But the second you crossed that threshold and let your real identity breathe, even for a flicker, they felt the floor drop beneath their feet. Once a mask breaks, it cuts anyone who tries to force it back on. That line isn't poetry to them. It's a warning, a reminder, a consequence, because now that the mask has shattered, now that the image they built around you has collapsed, they can't glue it back together with excuses or fake smiles. They can't rewind the moment they saw the real you. They can't unhear the strength in your voice or unsee the shift in your posture. They can't pretend the old version of you still exists when the new one is standing right in front of them, unfiltered and untamed. My dear chosen one, this is the point of no return, and they know it. That's why their behavior shifted so suddenly, why their tone softened, why their eyes became wary, why their energy tightened around you. They're afraid, not because you're dangerous, but because your authenticity tore down the comfortable illusion they depended on. They want you to shrink again. They want you to self-doubt again. They want you to fold yourself back into the tiny shape that made them feel tall, confident, superior. But that version of you? That version died the moment you tasted your own power without apology. Think about it. Once you've seen the world through your real eyes, once you've felt what it means to stand tall without lowering your voice, why would you ever return to dimming yourself? Imagine someone living in a dim, cramped room for years, believing the walls around them defined their whole life. Then one day, they step outside and see an endless sky, open space, a world so much bigger than the box they were confined to. Do you honestly think they would ever willingly go back? That's you, chosen one. You saw your true scale, and now everything they tried to offer you feels insulting. And that terrifies them. Not because you're cruel, not because you seek revenge, but because your evolution exposes the truth. They were wrong about you, and if they misjudged you this badly, what else have they been wrong about their whole lives? That question keeps them up at night. It rattles them at 3 a.m. when the distractions fade. They replay every interaction, every conversation, every moment they dismissed you, searching desperately for signs they should have noticed. But how could they? You weren't hiding because you were scared. You were hiding because you were observant, because you understand timing, because you reveal yourself with precision, not desperation. Now they're stuck in a reality they can't reshape, a reality where you are no longer predictable, no longer controllable, no longer trapped in the small frame they forced you into. You shattered their labels. You outgrew their assumptions. You destroyed their rulebook simply by existing in your truth. And here's what crushes them the most. There is no returning to before. Not for you, not ever. They can beg for the old you. They can reminisce about the past. They can pretend nothing changed. But you know the truth. That door closed behind you and locked from the inside. You stepped into your power, and the world reshaped itself around your authenticity. The small version of you is gone, retired, obsolete, irrelevant. And the person standing here now, the one walking tall, unmasked, unbothered, that's the real you, the version they never prepared for, the version they can't handle, the version they secretly feared would emerge. Chosen one. This is the chapter they hoped you'd never reach. But here you are, and the story only grows louder from here. Number 9. The truth about you. Their egos were too small to hold. The truth they were too small to hold. My dear chosen ones, this is the chapter they never wanted to reach, the revelation they were never built to handle. Because the truth about you, your real truth, was never something delicate or shameful or fragile. It was something dense, powerful, explosive, something that required a certain level of emotional muscle to even understand, let alone withstand. And the people who underestimated you, they simply didn't have that muscle. They were too small for the weight of who you actually are, too fragile for the gravity of your presence, too limited to even imagine the scale of your power. They weren't afraid of your flaws. They were afraid of your potential. See, chosen one, mercy always gets misread by people who only understand dominance. To them, your restraint looked like weakness. Your silence looked like fear. Your patience looked like surrender. They thought you avoided conflict because you were scared of losing, when in reality you avoided conflict because winning would have revealed too much too soon. They confused your decision not to strike with an inability to strike, and that was their fatal miscalculation. Because now that the mercy has expired, now that the mask has cracked, now that the truth is sitting right in front of them, they realize, horrified, that you were never the fragile one in the story. You were the controlled one. Imagine them now, chosen one, replaying everything like detectives in a panic, zooming into moments they once dismissed, scrutinizing expressions they once ignored. Every time you stayed calm instead of snapping, every time you walked away instead of retaliating, every moment you chose peace when chaos would have been easy. They're finally seeing those moments for what they really were: mercy. And mercy coming from someone powerful hits harder than any attack. Because in hindsight, they can now see the fork in every road they didn't notice before. The version of the story where you chose not to destroy them. Picture them standing on a beach they once bragged about, believing the sand beneath their feet was solid, stable, safe. Suddenly the tide pulls back and the ground shifts. What they thought was firm foundation turns into sinking uncertainty. That's exactly what your revelation did to their ego. Every assumption they clung to about who you were, gone. Every smug interpretation of your quiet moments, shattered. Every lazy opinion they used to feel superior, dissolving right in their hands like cheap paper in the rain. Their entire narrative collapses the moment they realize they weren't observing your weakness. They were witnessing your restraint. And let's tell the truth here. Chosen one, you didn't lose control. You were the only one who ever had it. You didn't stay silent because you had nothing to say. You stayed silent because not everyone deserves access to your full voice. You didn't avoid conflict because you were scared. You avoided conflict because you were aware of exactly what would happen if you stopped holding back. You weren't passive. You were strategic. You weren't defeated. You were selective. That's what chills them now, the realization that they were never the main character in your silence. They were the beneficiaries of your control. Now they don't know which version of you is coming next. And that unpredictability, it rattles them to their core. People who rely on power imbalances crumble the moment the ground levels out. They panic when they can't predict you. They freeze when they can't control you. They run mentally, emotionally, energetically, all because one reveal rewrote everything they thought they knew. You shifted the entire landscape with a single moment of truth. You didn't lash out. You didn't explode. You simply let the real you step forward, and that alone caused their entire ecosystem to glitch. Because your secret was never something soft, embarrassing, or humiliating. Your secret was your capacity, your depth, your resilience, your intelligence, your ability to sit quietly while others revealed themselves, your ability to pull back your full force without losing your identity, your ability to understand the game even when you weren't playing it. That was the power they weren't designed to face, and now that they've seen it, now that the truth is out, they cannot unsee it. They cannot unfeel the shift. They cannot unlearn the mistake they made. Chosen One, understand this. They weren't too cruel to deserve your truth. They were too small to handle it. You weren't hiding to survive. You were hiding because revealing yourself prematurely would have been a waste. And now that the curtains are open, now that the light is on, now that your real form is undeniable, every one of them has to stand in the discomfort of realizing they misread the strongest person in the room. Your truth didn't break you. It broke their illusion. And that's why they're terrified. And now, Chosen One, as we reach the edge of this chapter, let the weight of everything revealed settle into your bones. You've seen the truth, felt the shift, and recognized exactly why they're shaken. This is your turning point, not theirs. So before we move into what comes next, show your strength in the simplest way possible. Support this mission. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, drop 77 in the comments to claim your power, and share this message with another chosen one who needs to wake up. Your voice fuels this movement. Your presence pushes it forward.